On a scorching afternoon in 2011, a rusted Winnebago van sat paralyzed along Crenshaw Boulevard. Far from the shimmering Hollywood hills, this crumbling vehicle harbored a decaying ghost of American royalty. Inside the stifling cabin, a skin-and-bones old man stared blankly at the passing Los Angeles traffic. His deep sunken eyes betrayed absolutely nothing of the musical empire he had once built from scratch. Pedestrians hurried past the battered tires without ever suspecting the staggering secret hidden right inside. The forgotten stranger breathing heavily in that torn seat had once united an entire fractured nation. To understand the tragedy, we must first rewind to a brilliant summer. The year was 1969 in a deeply divided America. A cultural detonation was happening across the rural farmlands of New York. 500,000 young people gathered in a muddy dairy field. They were chasing a radical dream of absolute freedom and unconditional love. This was the pinnacle of the American hippie movement in full bloom. Against the grim backdrop of war, they demanded peace and sonic liberation. It was a moment where music truly felt like a weapon. They needed a prophet to unite this massive sea of restless youth. Long before that muddy festival, he was simply a prodigy in church. He grew up steeped in the rich traditions of stirring gospel choirs. His musical foundation was built on deep spirituality and powerful vocal harmonies. By his early 20s, he was already producing massive regional radio hits. He possessed an uncanny ear for blending diverse sounds into something new. He deliberately recruited musicians from vastly different cultural and ethnic backgrounds. The grand goal was to create a miniature version of a perfect society. His creative vision was exceptionally ambitious for the racially divided late 60s. They rehearsed relentlessly until their complex rhythms locked together with perfect precision. Enter a vibrant young visionary from Vallejo, California, named Sly Stone. He stepped onto the massive wooden stage wearing a dazzling fringed jacket. His towering afro and oversized sunglasses perfectly captured the era's wild spirit. He was not just playing music for a vast festival crowd. He was conducting an electrified sermon for 500,000 desperate believers. The clock struck 3 in the morning on that damp Sunday. Yet the immense audience remained entirely transfixed by his explosive magnetic energy. Sly and the family Stone delivered a performance of sheer chaotic brilliance. Every single note felt like a vibrant burst of pure American optimism. His revolutionary band was a striking anomaly in the divided music industry. They were the first major American rock group to be fully integrated. Men and women of different races stood shoulder to shoulder on stage. They visually represented the exact utopian future the massive crowd desperately craved. Sly hammered his keyboard with a fierce and joyful rhythmic intensity. He effortlessly blended thunderous rock guitars with deep infectious soul bass lines. The humid night air vibrated with a radical new funk sound. This performance fundamentally rewired the entire DNA of popular American music. Nobody had ever witnessed such a spectacular fusion of genres before. The defining moment arrived when they played their massive hit, Everyday People. This glorious anthem perfectly summarized the hopeful innocence of the late 60s. It was a simple but profound plea for universal tolerance and equality. The entire muddy hillside erupted into a synchronized chorus of pure joy. 500,000 voices echoed the lyrics into the dark upstate sky. For those few magical hours, the idealistic hippie dream seemed completely real. Sly Stone stood at the absolute epicenter of a massive cultural revolution. He possessed the rare ability to make complex social issues sound incredibly catchy. Music critics instantly praised him as the definitive voice of a new generation. Radio stations across the entire country played his infectious songs on endless loops. The heavy bass lines became the dominant heartbeat of massive urban cities. Fans from every conceivable background bought millions of his colorful vinyl records. He proved that powerful political statements could also dominate the pop charts. His vibrant musical blueprint would heavily influence countless artists for decades to come. He was earning staggering amounts of money for every single explosive performance. Major record labels viewed him as their most valuable and untouchable asset. His smiling face appeared on the vibrant covers of countless national magazines. He bought extravagant sports cars and threw incredibly lavish Hollywood parties. To the outside world, his spectacular ascent felt entirely limitless and unstoppable. He was the ultimate embodiment of the wild, unbridled American rock dream. Everything he touched instantly turned into immense cultural influence and massive wealth. Sly had successfully hacked the rigid formula of mainstream pop success, but this beautiful utopian facade concealed a rapidly growing internal darkness. The intense pressure of maintaining this monumental success began to crush him. He was carrying the heavy expectations of an entire generation on his shoulders. How long can a single man sustain such blinding, incandescent cultural heat? The music industry is notoriously brutal to its brightest and most sensitive stars. They demand endless genius while constantly ignoring the deep psychological toll. Behind the joyful funk beats, a quiet exhaustion was slowly taking root. He started missing important rehearsals and showing up late to massive concerts. What followed was one of the strangest swerves in the history of American pop. The American dream always demands a heavy toll from its brightest cultural icons. Unprecedented success suddenly flooded the band with millions of dollars almost overnight. Royalties from hit records generated a staggering cash flow by the early 70s. They secured massive festival payouts and endless streams of lucrative publishing rights. The studio handed out blank checks to keep their golden goose producing music. Wealth elevated them into the exclusive upper echelons of Los Angeles high society. But massive fortunes usually bring dark shadows into a fragile creative mind. Financial abundance rapidly mutated into a terrifying catalyst for absolute self-destruction. The relentless machine of the music industry demanded constant innovation and endless tours. Studio executives aggressively pushed for another platinum album to satisfy hungry investors. The heavy burden of carrying an entire musical movement completely broke his spirit. Can a fragile mind sustain this level of crushing societal pressure indefinitely today? Exhausting schedules forced him to seek an artificial escape from the agonizing fatigue. Sleepless nights in sterile recording studios slowly drained away his natural artistic joy. He desperately needed something powerful to maintain that superhuman level of creative energy. The high society elite gladly offered a glamorous solution to his mounting exhaustion. This treacherous environment normalized extreme habits among the wealthiest entertainment industry stars then. White powder quickly became the daily fuel for his marathon music recording sessions. Cocaine disguised itself as a magical remedy for his crippling physical exhaustion perfectly. A heavy habit costing thousands of dollars a week soon became his reality. He consumed lethal doses of strong narcotics just to get out of bed. The drug temporarily masked the profound emptiness growing deep inside his lonely soul. But the fleeting euphoria always crashed into intense waves of unbearable emotional darkness. He snorted toxic lines off expensive glass tables inside luxurious Hollywood party mansions. Shady dealers essentially lived on his payroll to ensure a constant daily supply. What started as casual recreation rapidly escalated into a terrifying daily chemical dependency. His genius brain was being hijacked by an incredibly addictive and ruthless substance. The cocaine aggressively attacked the delicate neural pathways of his brilliant musical mind. Dark fear began to replace the joyous love that once defined his concerts. Terrifying auditory hallucinations constantly whispered cruel threats into his tired ears every night. He started seeing dangerous enemies hiding behind the smiling faces of loyal friends. The joyful architect of peace was now drowning heavily in a paranoid sea. A creeping paranoia slowly poisoned every single personal relationship he had ever built. He vehemently refused to attend crucial meetings out of an irrational assassination fear. The strong drugs convinced him that the entire world secretly plotted his downfall. His beautiful artistic vision shattered into countless jagged pieces of delusional mental terror. He spent astronomical sums outfitting his lavish properties with heavy security and guard dogs. The panicked studio executives watched helplessly as their most profitable musical asset lost control. Millions of dollars were systematically burned through to feed his ravenous daily drug addiction. He ruthlessly fired faithful band members because the voices in his head demanded isolation. His glamorous American dream had fully transformed into a horrifyingly lonely psychological prison cell. The joyful music completely stopped as the terrifying chemical madness finally took total dominance. He frantically locked himself away from the very society he once actively sought to unite. Everyone naturally assumed this rapid mental decline was the absolute bottom of his tragic journey. The unsuspecting public genuinely believed his glorious story could not take a darker turn. What happened next will completely shatter everything you ever thought you knew about him. The hills of Bel-Air promised absolute safety for America's elite. Billionaires built massive mansions to hide from the chaotic world outside. Sly Stone bought a spectacular estate right in this glamorous neighborhood. It was supposed to be a luxurious reward for his musical genius. Instead of a sanctuary, the property quickly became a terrifying prison. This sprawling fortress did not keep the imaginary monsters outside the gates. It trapped the most dangerous demons right inside his very own mind. Heavy velvet curtains were nailed permanently across every single towering glass window. Sunlight never reached the expensive Italian marble floors of his grand living room. The vibrant hippie icon now lived entirely in deep, artificial, suffocating darkness. Expensive antique furniture sat abandoned in the gloomy, drug-filled corners of the estate. Thick layers of dust slowly covered his platinum records and golden music awards. He paced the endless dark hallways for days without any real sleep. Cocaine rewired his brilliant brain into a paranoid, hyper-vigilant military surveillance machine. Every sudden shadow dancing on the wall felt like a deadly immediate threat. This extreme fear required the absolute most extreme form of private security. He hired the notorious Hells Angels biker gang to guard his expensive property. Fierce men in leather vests patrolled the quiet, manicured lawns of Bel-Air. They carried heavy chains and real firearms through the affluent, peaceful neighborhood streets. Inside the darkened master bedroom, Sly sat tightly clutching a loaded assault rifle. A fierce guard dog sat viciously alert by his side at all times. He waited desperately for imaginary assassins that were definitely never going to arrive. The man who once sang about love now trusted absolutely no living soul. But here is where the story takes a truly terrifying psychological turn. His massive wealth was essentially financing his own rapid mental destruction. Poor addicts eventually run out of money and hit rock bottom much faster. A multi-millionaire can easily afford to fund their lethal addiction for many years. He possessed enough cash to buy mountains of cocaine without leaving his fortress. The millions of dollars effectively built a high wall around his growing madness. Nobody could intervene because his immense wealth shielded him from normal society rules. He was a king completely imprisoned by the dark magic of his crown. Visitors described the atmosphere inside the mansion as incredibly toxic and deeply terrifying. Bodyguards constantly searched random guests for hidden wires and concealed deadly weapons. Music executives were forced to negotiate while staring down the barrel of guns. The studio equipment in the basement remained mostly silent and gathering thick dust. Instead of creating beautiful melodies, he obsessively recorded random conversations in the house. He spent hours listening to the tapes to uncover fake assassination plots. The creative genius who united America was now completely fragmented and heavily armed. He built a hidden escape tunnel beneath the beautiful floors of his mansion. This secret passage was meant to save him from the phantom CIA agents. He genuinely believed the federal government wanted to assassinate him for his influence. Every creak of the wooden floorboards sounded like creeping footsteps of trained killers. The Hells Angels eventually started fighting among themselves inside the chaotic luxury estate. Police helicopters frequently circled above the compound trying to understand the violent disturbances. His neighbors in Bel Air watched in pure horror as the estate collapsed. The ultimate American dream had officially morphed into a grotesque, never-ending nightmare. This phase of his life perfectly illustrates the dark paradox of extreme success. He finally achieved everything society tells us we should desperately work to acquire. He owned a massive house on the most prestigious hill in the country, yet his mind was locked inside a windowless cage of absolute sheer terror. The drugs completely erased the joyful musician and left a heavily armed ghost. His luxurious Bel Air mansion was just a glorified maximum security prison cell. The golden chains of extreme wealth dragged him further down into the abyss. The outside world slowly forgot the legendary man hiding behind those closed gates. Radio stations continued playing his cheerful vintage hits about universal love and harmony. Meanwhile, the actual singer was crawling frantically across his own expensive bedroom floor. He was desperately searching the thick carpets for dropped white rocks of cocaine. This heartbreaking contrast remains one of the darkest legends in American music history. The fortified walls successfully kept the public out of his tragic personal nightmare, but those exact same walls also violently blocked any possible chance of rescue. The toxic paranoia inside that Bel Air fortress soon leaked right outside. It deeply infected the very people who built his musical dream. Loyal band members could no longer tolerate the endless erratic behavior. Crucial rehearsals were skipped while studio sessions became entirely unpredictable disasters. Sometimes he would force his exhausted musicians to wait for days. Then he would suddenly demand they record complex tracks at midnight. One by one, his most trusted musical brothers finally walked away. The legendary family stone was shattering into a million jagged pieces. Without his brilliant bandmates, the once glorious sound began to hollow. The American music industry has always operated on ruthless corporate math. Executives will tolerate massive drug problems only if you generate cash. When the hit records stopped charting, their corporate patience instantly evaporated. Record labels quickly grew incredibly tired of the missed concert dates. Angry promoters demanded heavy refunds for massive shows that never started. Epic Records eventually froze his massive multi-million-dollar recording contracts completely. They ruthlessly locked the expensive studio doors on their golden goose. The brutal industry machine chewed him up and mercilessly spat him out. He was no longer a highly profitable asset for the record executives. They simply turned their backs and eagerly looked for the next star. With his massive income suddenly frozen, the financial empire rapidly collapsed. Millions of dollars vanished into thick clouds of expensive white powder. He signed terrible music publishing deals just to secure fast cash. Shady managers swindled whatever remaining wealth he had foolishly left behind. The federal government aggressively circled his sprawling properties for unpaid taxes. Lawsuits from angry concert promoters piled up on his desk every week. He was bleeding out money faster than he could ever earn it. He quickly accumulated hundreds of thousands of dollars in crushing debt. His luxurious Bel Air mansion was eventually lost to a brutal foreclosure. Those expensive imported sports cars were quickly repossessed by angry local banks. Everything he had worked so hard to build was rapidly slipping away. But the heavy drug addiction stole much more than his material wealth. It systematically stripped away his dignity and his legendary professional reputation entirely. He became a tragic punchline in brutal late-night television comedy monologues. His incredible legacy was being overshadowed by endless rumors and ugly scandals. Former celebrity friends actively avoided his desperate midnight phone calls every night. The brilliant man who once preached cultural unity was completely isolated alone. He traded his immense cultural respect for just another quick chemical high. Every single professional bridge he ever built was now burning to ash. The vibrant king of psychedelic soul was reduced to a struggling pariah. The iconic musical genius was effectively exiled from his own creative kingdom. But what followed was one of the strangest swerves in American pop history. The absolute bottom of this tragic downward spiral was approaching incredibly fast. Nobody could possibly predict how far this legendary star would eventually fall. The ruthless corporate machine had successfully drained every drop of his magic. The unforgiving streets of Los Angeles were waiting to claim another victim. The vast fortune completely evaporated into thin, unforgiving air. The IRS mercilessly seized his sprawling luxury properties immediately. He was violently evicted from his heavily fortified fortress. The Grand Beverly Hills estate was auctioned off quickly. The heavy iron gates locked him out forever now. He packed his remaining life into small cardboard boxes. He traded velvet couches for cheap, dreary motel beds. The descent down the social ladder was brutally fast. He drifted hopelessly through the dusty fringes of Los Angeles. He bounced between sketchy neighborhoods and forgotten dusty suburbs. His addresses shifted rapidly from prime real estate to nothing. He slept uncomfortably on the worn couches of aging acquaintances. Soon, those fragile temporary bridges completely burned down forever. The ruthless music industry had completely erased his phone number. The glamorous Hollywood dream morphed into a gritty urban nightmare. He wandered the neon-lit streets utterly unrecognized by passing strangers. The City of Angels is notoriously cruel to fallen idols. He became another invisible ghost walking among the regular citizens. But what happened next was a truly tragic, harsh reality. He purchased a battered white Winnebago campervan for survival. This was not some trendy modern nomadic lifestyle choice today. This was raw survival in the unforgiving American urban jungle. The rusting vehicle became his entire shrinking physical universe now. He parked it illegally on the cracked concrete city sidewalks. He moved constantly to carefully avoid angry local patrol police. The glorious stadium stages were replaced by dirty asphalt lots. The former king of funk lived completely off the grid. The cramped interior smelled faintly of old stale cigarette smoke. The faded floral curtains stayed permanently drawn shut tightly every day. He cooked cheap canned beans on a tiny rusty stove. The sweltering summer heat turned the metal box into an oven. Bitter winter nights brought a biting chill through the thin walls. He wrapped himself in heavily stained sleeping bags for vital warmth. This rolling tin can was a profound and deeply tragic reality. The vehicle blended perfectly into the vast landscape of urban poverty. Thousands of forgotten souls live identically across modern Los Angeles streets. He was just another broken man surviving day by painful day. The rusted Winnebago slowly rolled down to gritty Crenshaw Boulevard. This neighborhood is miles away from glittering Hollywood elite wealth. The loud street is deeply scarred by years of economic neglect. Police sirens wailed constantly through the tense dark midnight hours. He parked quietly near a noisy local chicken fast food joint. The noisy area offered a strange kind of invisible urban camouflage. Nobody looks twice at a battered RV in this struggling district. The vibrant neighborhood bustled loudly right outside his thin metal door. Yet he remained completely isolated inside his tiny rolling metal prison. The cultural distance from Woodstock was truly staggering to witness. The vibrant young visionary from Vallejo was completely gone forever. The man trapped inside was frail, exhausted, and dangerously thin. His magnificent posture crumbled into a heavy, painful stoop. His wild, iconic afro was replaced by sparse graying hair. The dazzling fringe jackets were traded for oversized, dirty hoodies. His brilliant eyes were clouded with deep, heavy, endless exhaustion. His trembling hands gripped the cheap plastic steering wheel tightly. The brutal years of heavy addiction had completely stolen his youth. The physical toll of the street was written on his face. He looked exactly like any other forgotten homeless elderly man. This frail shadow of a man held a massive secret. The homeless elder in the rusty van was actually a legend. This was the exact man who commanded Woodstock so powerfully. This was the musical god who radically revolutionized American pop music. This was the brilliant architect of a massive cultural sonic revolution. The old man shivering inside the Winnebago was indeed Sylvester Stewart. The entire world knew him simply as the legendary Sly Stone. The mastermind behind everyday people was now an entirely unhoused man. The tragic realization hits the viewer with a heavy, sickening thud. The ultimate American cultural icon had fallen straight to the bottom. The sheer scale of this tragic plunge is deeply terrifying. He fell from the absolute highest peak of massive human adoration. He crashed onto the hardest, unforgiving concrete pavement imaginable in America. The ruthless music industry simply looked away and kept counting money. They continuously profited from his timeless, energetic funk-pop radio anthems. Meanwhile, the creator slept fitfully inside a freezing and rusted van. He watched the world move on through a dirty, cracked windshield. The vibrant city buzzed loudly around its completely forgotten fallen king. The heavy silence inside that cramped vehicle was absolutely deafening now. Let us return to that decaying Winnebago parked on busy Crenshaw Boulevard. The oppressive Los Angeles summer heat baked the rusty metal shell mercilessly every day. Inside this claustrophobic space lay the tragic physical ruins of a musical god. Stacks of greasy fast food wrappers completely covered the stained front vehicle dashboard. Empty soda cans and discarded clothing littered the cramped floorboards absolutely everywhere inside. Right in the middle of this tragic domestic squalor sat something entirely impossible. A genuine Golden Grammy Award rested casually against a discarded cardboard burger box. The highly prestigious music trophy was now covered in thick layers of dust. It served as a haunting tombstone for a thoroughly destroyed and forgotten American dream. This single shiny object silently screamed of a magnificent past that was completely lost. He traded luxurious Bel Air mansions for a broken vehicle smelling of grease. But the real secret lived silently inside a terribly battered silver laptop computer. This incredibly cheap electronic device sat precariously on a torn synthetic leather passenger seat. Hidden securely within its hard drive were hundreds of completely unreleased studio recordings. These files were the desperate final whispers of a once generational and respected genius. He spent his deeply lonely nights constantly tweaking these unfinished electronic tracks entirely alone. His violently trembling fingers desperately chased the magical rhythmic grooves of his glorious youth. Would any music executive ever actually hear these final echoes of a brilliant mind? Yet these modern digital files would likely never reach a single popular radio station. The notoriously ruthless music industry had permanently locked its heavy corporate doors against him. He was effectively a forgotten ghost, haunting the very dark edges of modern society. His unparalleled creative brilliance was forever trapped inside a completely cheap plastic recording machine. Outside the terribly frosted windows of the van flowed the vibrant modern American city. Large groups of energetic teenagers regularly walked down the hot concrete sidewalks passing nearby. Heavy hip-hop bass lines aggressively pounded from their expensive portable Bluetooth speakers daily. They were energetically nodding their youthful heads to the absolute latest massive rap hits. Almost every single one of those modern beats heavily sampled his timeless original masterpieces. The fundamental rhythmic foundation of their street culture was literally built by his hands. Yet they casually walked past the rusty abandoned Winnebago without a single second glance. They simply saw another tragic homeless casualty of the brutally unforgiving Los Angeles streets. The careless teenagers joyfully danced to his incredible musical genius on the cracked pavement. Meanwhile, the starving original creator of their favorite hit songs slowly wasted away inside. The legendary architect of their modern musical freedom remained completely invisible to them forever. Start by reflecting on the grand illusion of the 1960s American counterculture, where absolute freedom was the ultimate currency of a fiercely rebellious generation. The sprawling, mud-soaked fields of Woodstock represented a collective dream where rigid societal rules were joyously dismantled in favor of radical individualism and boundless artistic expression. He stood triumphantly at the very epicenter of that unprecedented cultural detonation, preaching a radiant gospel of liberation that resonated deeply through the troubled veins of a divided nation. To the millions of disillusioned youths frantically searching for profound meaning in a turbulent era, his revolutionary music was a vibrant map pointing toward an idealized utopia where the human spirit could roam completely unrestrained. But here is where the ultimate irony lies, hidden just beneath the glamorous surface of his spectacular mainstream success. The intoxicating allure of the relentless American pop machine constantly encourages a highly dangerous myth that true artistic genius requires the absolute destruction of all personal boundaries and traditional moral guardrails. When a capitalist society eagerly hands a generational talent an entirely blank check of unlimited wealth and blind adoration, the sudden absence of gravitational consequences does not elevate the soul, but rather invites a catastrophic psychological freefall. The very same permissive cultural ecosystem that enthusiastically celebrated his uninhibited rebellion also subtly provided the lethal chemical tools inherently necessary to dismantle his brilliant mind entirely from the inside out. The staggering paradox of his tragic existence becomes agonizingly clear when attempting to measure the vast emotional distance between a sunlit festival stage and the suffocating darkness of his subsequent isolation. He had famously orchestrated the joyous, uninhibited liberation of 500,000 mesmerized strangers, yet he systematically engineered a terrifying psychological supermax prison for himself behind the heavy velvet curtains of a fortified Bel Air estate. That immense financial fortune, generated entirely by uplifting anthems of universal brotherhood and collective harmony, ultimately financed a solitary confinement so absolute that it permanently severed him from the very humanity he once passionately championed. The chilling, undeniable trajectory from leading a vibrant generational chorus to whispering frantic paranoid delusions into the hollow silence of a rusted Winnebago on Crenshaw Boulevard practically defies basic human comprehension. This devastating metamorphosis serves as a haunting, permanent monument to the incredible toll exacted by unchecked chemical indulgence and the inherently predatory nature of extreme celebrity worship in modern America. we are collectively forced to confront the deeply uncomfortable reality that the exact same society which eagerly consumes the brilliant, illuminating fire of its greatest artists often turns a deliberately blind eye when that raging fire inevitably begins consuming the artist. The heavily romanticized historical narrative of the tortured musical genius is merely a convenient cultural illusion specifically designed to comfortably excuse the profound collateral damage left in the violent wake of spectacular commercial success. His unprecedented story forcefully dismantles the glittering, superficial facade of the entertainment industry, revealing a ruthless capitalist mechanism that extracts profound cultural value while leaving the vulnerable individual fundamentally hollowed out. What followed is a stark revelation that will fundamentally challenge exactly how we measure the true hidden cost of artistic immortality in a culture hopelessly addicted to extreme consumption. The ultimate, overarching tragedy of this narrative is not simply the staggering, highly publicized loss of immense material wealth, but rather the heartbreaking irony of a visionary who beautifully sang about breaking societal chains while actively forging his own inescapable, invisible chemical shackles. He ultimately became the definitive cautionary tale of a society that routinely confuses reckless, unrestrained self-destruction with profound, authentic artistic liberty, ultimately paying the absolute highest possible personal price for a deeply misunderstood concept of freedom. In the bitter end, the charismatic man who possessed the rare, transcendent harmonic power to set an entire restless generation completely free, tragically lost the single vital psychological key desperately required to emancipate himself. Sly Stone remains the greatest tragic paradox of American pop culture. He was a spectacular musical visionary who confidently soundtracked a revolution. He gave an entire young generation the courage to embrace freedom, yet he tragically forgot how to properly save his own soul. His incredible music still echoes loudly across modern radio stations today. But the brilliant man who wrote those joyful anthems disappeared completely. He foolishly traded his musical crown for a heavy crown of thorns. The sparkling stadium lights were eventually replaced by very cold street lamps. He essentially became a heartbreaking cautionary tale for future aspiring artists. This heartbreaking historical journey reveals something deeply terrifying about human nature. The boundary between absolute creative freedom and dangerous temptation is invisible. We all secretly desire to finally break free from our daily routines. We constantly chase shiny material things that promise us ultimate personal liberation. But sometimes the exact shiny things we chase become our darkest prisons. The absolute deepest traps in life never actually look like heavy cages. They usually arrive perfectly dressed as thrilling adventures or expensive white powder. True lasting freedom requires the quiet discipline to survive your own success. That is the heavy shared burden of every single person chasing a dream. Here is where it gets incredibly interesting for all of you. Well, whatever your personal opinion on this wild era of music, you cannot deny the massive cultural impact he left behind forever. Where do you personally draw the line between passion and dangerous obsession? Many people believe the brutal American music industry could have saved him. Please let me know your honest thoughts down in the comment section. I will be reading through your incredible perspectives later this evening. Thank you so much for joining me on this deeply tragic ride. Cheers to the beautiful music that somehow survived the darkest personal storms. I have been Johnny, and I will see you all next time. Stay safe out there and always remember to watch your own step.